Hey, and welcome to another video. In this video, we're going to carry on with the dealership level. With that, let's get started. So first we're going to do is we're going to create the Spawn actor blueprint. So in the maps dealership folder, going to right click, head over to blueprint, actor, and then we're going to call this BP dealership. And then we're going to open it. Then we're just going to dock this to the top, and then we're going to go to the event graph, and then under components we're going to add a skeletal mesh, and then we're going to call this the display mesh. Then what we're going to do is we're going to move the event begin play out the way. We're going to drag it to display mesh, drag it in, and then from display mesh drag off and then set skeletal mesh asset, connect the execution pin, and then from the new mesh we're going to drag off and then promote to variable, and we're going to call this selected mesh. And then that's going to be it. Compile and save. Then we're going to go into dealership level and then drag this in, and then we're going to save, and then we're going to head over to edit, project settings, maps and mode, and then turn the editor startup map from the main menu to the dealership. Then close that, and then we're going to head over to the vehicle button widget, then in here, and then select the button, and then make sure that it is variable. I forgot to do this in the last video. And then compile, head to the event graph, and then we're gonna move the event tick down just a little bit out the way, and then under the event construct, right click, and then get game instance, drag off from the return value, and then cost to BPG at game, connect the execution pin from the as BPG at game, drag off, and then promote to variable. And then after the set, we're going to drag off and then get all actors of class, and the class we are looking for is the BP dealership which was created. Then from the out access, drag off and then get a copy, and then drag off and then promote variable, and then we're going to call this as BP dealership. Connect the execution pin, and then we're going to create a variable, and in this variable we are going to call it vehicle index of type integer, and then we're going to make it instance editable and expose on spawn, and then we want to hold control, drag it in, and then drag off from the vehicle index, then look for set vehicle index, then connect the execution pin, and then as well we are going to drag in the vehicle name, and then from here we are going to drag off and then say set text, then connect that. And then from the in-text, we are going to drag off, and then we're going to promote this to a variable. Then we're going to call this vehicle name. And then this one as well, we're going to make it instance editable and expose on spawn. And then if you are using the vehicle's image instead of the vehicle name, you're going to drag in the variable for your image. And then what you would do is, let me just show, we're going to create a variable here real quick. We're going to call this vehicle image, and then it's going to be of type texture 2D object reference, then compile, and then we also want to make it instance editable and expose on spawn. And then what you do is you would drag this in instead of the vehicle name, and then you would use this as, oh no, let me just show this in the designer real quick. I'm just going to add an image because I need an image to show this. So we're just going to drop this. Okay, we're just going to replace this quick. Let me just show this. Then we put the image on there instead, and then we make this as variable. Yeah, fix that. No, I'm gonna fix this now. And then what you would do is the image, you would then drag this in, and then you would drag off from the image, and then you would set brush from material, and then you would take your variable, connect it to the, oh no, sorry, wrong one. You would drag off and then set brush from texture. There, that's the one, not from material. Then you would take the vehicle image and then connect it to the texture, and then you would have, and then if we just remove this out the way, and then yours would look like this instead. So you'd have the vehicle index being set, and then you will set the image using a variable, and then you set brush from texture instead. Let me just remove that and then get back to setup. And then the next thing we're going to do is by the button, the vehicle button, we're going to go by the unhovered, and then by the unhovered, what we're going to do is we're going to drag in the SBP dealership. So drag off from there, and then we're going to drag off and then get display mesh, and then we're going to drag off and then we'll look for set skeletal mesh asset, and then we're going to connect the execution pin, and then from the new mesh drag off and then promote to variable, and then we're going to call this yet again selected mesh, and then this one yet again is going to be instance editable and expose on spawn, and then we're going to compile. And then the last thing we'll do is set up the on click for the button. So select the button and then on click, and then for the on click we're going to drag off and then we'll look for remove all widgets, and then we're going to drag off and then create widget, and the widget we're going to create is the pop-up. So the purchase pop-up, we're going to drag off from the return value, promote to variable as WBP purchase pop-up, and then we're going to drag off and then add to viewport. Then we're going to drag in the as BPGI game, drag off, and then get BPS vehicles, drag off from BPS vehicles, and then get a reference, and then also from the as BPGI game, drag off, and then we're going to look for the get vehicle ID variable we created. Actually, no, not get, we need to set the vehicle ID. So this variable is not one that we are going to save. It is merely a temporary variable that we use to communicate the integer of the car from when it is loaded into the widget, because each button gets its own, not each button, each car gets its own button, and then each button has its own number. So we need to know which button has been selected. So what we're going to do is we have this temporary number in the vehicle ID that we get from the game instance, and then we use the vehicle index to then set this value. And then in the next part of the video where we do the dealership widget, we are then going to set this vehicle index. We go from the vehicle ID and then connect that to the get, and then from the get we're going to drag off and then break, and then from the data asset we're going to drag off and then get price, and then we're going to drag in the as WBP purchase pop-up, drag that in, and then we're going to drag off and then get vehicle price, the variable we created, drag off from the vehicle price, and then set text, and then take from the price and then connect it to the in text, and then select the break, scroll down and then hide unconnected, then connect the execution pin, and then this is how we will get the price for the selected vehicle. We're going to compile, save, head over to the dealership widget, then we're going to head over to the event graph, and then in here, and then the first thing we're going to do is set up the back button. So select the back button, on click, and then we're going to drag in the as BPGI game, and then we're going to drag off and then set workshop, and then we're going to drag off and then say open level by object reference, and then the one we're opening is the open world, and then we're going to take the event tick, move it out of the way, take the back button and also move this out of the way because the next part of code is quite long, and then after the set as BPGI game, hold S, left click, create a sequence node, and then we're going to drag in the as BPGI game, drag off, and then get BPS vehicles. From the BPS vehicles, drag off and then for each loop, connect the execution to the then 0, and then we're going to drag off from the loop body and then drag it out of bed and then look for create widget, and the widget we are going to create is the vehicle button, and then we have the parameters available here. I need to go and remove this. Actually, I'm not going to use this. we're going to go from the array element, drag off, and then break, and then with the vehicle index, we're going to take from the array index. So this is how we get the number for each button, because it will correspond to one of the vehicles. Each one will have its own array index. So we take the array index and then we use that to set the vehicle index. And then we go from the break, expand, and then the one we're looking for is the vehicle name, which comes from the data asset. So drag off and then get vehicle name. Or if you're using the image, then you'll get the vehicle image, and then you will plug in the vehicle image by the exposed image variable. And if you're using the vehicle name, connect it to the vehicle name. And then for the selected mesh, that would be the display mesh, and then connect that, and then select the break, scroll down, and then hide unconnected, and then drag in the vehicles variable, which is the scroll box that we created, drag in the vehicles, and then drag off and then add child. And then for the content, it's from the return value, drag into content, connect the execution pin, and then from the then one, we're going to drag off and then look for does save game exist. The save game we're looking for is porn, and then if it doesn't exist, we're going to have a branch, connect the condition, drag in the back button, get, and then drag off and then set is enabled, and then by default we're going to disable the button so that if the player doesn't have a card, then they cannot go to the open world. The sequence of events is when the player is first introduced to the game, when there are no save slots yet, you go from the play to the main menu to the dealership so you can purchase your first car. And in that moment, we don't want the player to be able to use the back button because they don't yet have a car. If they could use the back button, then you would be thrown into the open world with no car to spawn in. So we only want the back button to work when the player already has a car. So for the first time the player goes to the dealership, they shouldn't be able to go back. And then once they have purchased their first car and they want to go purchase their second car, then at that point you will then be able to use the back button. If you don't have enough money to buy the car that you want, then you can go back and then come back at a later time, but at least you will have a car at that point. So now with all of this done, we are going to go and test out and see if the code works. So we're going to compile, save, head to the dealership, save all, and then we're going to play the level. And then as you can see, I have the 3 cars, but now it's not set up properly. So we're going to exit real quick. Then we're going to head over to the dealership, designer, select the scroll box, and then the orientation from vertical to horizontal. Then we're going to compile, and then we're going to test again. So now we have them set up properly, and then here we have the 3 cars that I have in the blueprint structure. So the 3 cars are here, and then if you want to add some spacing between the buttons, you would go to the vehicle button, head to the designer, select the button, and then add padding around it. So we're going to add a padding of 10 on all sides, compile, play the level again, and then now they have padding and all 3 cars are being displayed. And then if you click on one of them, this will pop up, and as you can see, we have not yet configured everything, which we'll do in the next video. Nothing works yet, so we're just going to close that, and then in the next video we're going to set up the final touches. That is everything. So now with that brings us to the end of this video, and until the next one.